Hey, what's up, May 23 people? I've got your Title 1 breakdown for the TOK essay. I got it ready to go. Titles launched yesterday. I got this video today. Let's break this down. Let's get started.
Get an A in TOK.
You'll see on the screen here, I have launched TOK Masterclass, a fully online, on-demand, complete TOK class with me. Over 30 lessons, we've got hours of work. I give you a research database that will be super helpful. If you wanna sign up for that, if you wanna join that class, you can do that with with coupon code YouTube subscriber. That gets you 10% off. If you also want to send me your draft, check me out on Fiverr. The links are down below. Also, most importantly, the free thing, if you go to getanaintok.com/free stuff, I'm gonna give you outlines. I'm gonna give you organizers. I'm gonna help you out for free. All right, but you want something really free right now, which is a YouTube video. Let's take a look at this. Title number 1, I love it, is replicability. Let me just highlight this because I love it so much. Is replicability, well, that's not highlighting, that's scratching it out. Gross. Is it necessary in the production of knowledge? Discuss it with references to 2 areas of knowledge. So you're probably wondering, what is replicability? Well, I got your definition. Thanks, Google. The ability of a scientific experiment or trial to be repeated to obtain a consistent result. So what we're really asking is this: do you have to repeat it and get the same result for it to be knowledge? Is it necessary? So that's really all that this is asking. It's really quite easy. Now notice again, and this is from Google, this isn't perfect. This is specifically with regards to the natural sciences, okay? But so what you can do here, if you want to go the easy route, and honestly, I think I would because there's so much good evidence here, I would do the natural sciences and the human sciences. I would just do that. I wouldn't do art for this. I'm gonna bring up an idea with history though, that I think could really be done. So that will be cool too. And then if you want to do math, math will totally work. I would say that the conclusions you're gonna come up with math are going to be the same conclusions you're going to come up with for the natural sciences, but your evidence will be better for natural sciences. So I would definitely choose one of the sciences, and then your other could be either math or history. That's how I would do it. Now, something that has been happening all over the internet here, and I don't want to insult people, but you guys are just getting started. Let's talk about last year's. What they did all of the time was they defined terms, and they would just do this awful introduction. I love that I can talk trash about people because I know they're not going to watch this video. And they would just define really obvious terms. So they would say for the sake of the essay, the word necessary will mean required. Yeah, no, we totally know what necessary means, okay? So only define terms if you're going to come up with a very, very specific and unique definition of that word, okay? But for this is a really easy prompt to work on. We know what the production of knowledge is. You don't need to define production. Yeah, no, you're totally fine. So don't define the terms. Give me something interesting. I'll give you a quote you can open up with, but remember, I'll get to this in a minute, but if you're gonna open up with a quote, actually use that quote. Don't just put a quote there and then start your introduction. That's just really tacky, and what that's gonna tell your examiner, I don't wanna be rude, but it's gonna say you're just not that smart. Okay, this is only about the production of knowledge and nothing else. So this is not about, this is about the confirmation of knowledge, but this isn't about sharing or anything. This is about creating knowledge. So I learned this, or more importantly, we learned this, and then whether or not that can be counted as knowledge. So related to that, there's this concept of shared knowledge versus personal knowledge, and this used to be, this is old. My handwriting is so good. My second grader has better handwriting. This was huge in the old TOK course guide. So if you have a TOK teacher who's been doing TOK for a long time, they might talk about this. It's not that big of a deal. Shared knowledge is knowledge that's shared, knowledge that we all have together. Personal knowledge is knowledge that only you have. So for example, I have personal knowledge of the beverages that are here outside of the camera shot. So for example, I've got my Diet Coke. Bam, shared knowledge now, okay? So what we would really think about, oh wait, you didn't know? There's 2 beverages here because I love drinking. Pumpkin spice latte, it's my basic white girl, yeah. So that changed from personal knowledge to shared knowledge. That's it, okay? But what this means with regard to replicability is if I discover something and I don't know I haven't confirmed it and it's just my personal knowledge, this would actually ask if personal knowledge could even be counted as knowledge because it hasn't been replicated yet. Now, if you replicate it yourself, then it could be counted knowledge. And so that's one of the things you could talk about. But even though I rarely talk about shared knowledge and personal knowledge, this might actually be a good time to do it. Related to that, you might be commenting on the nature of knowledge. So some might claim to have knowledge without replicability. So if we're talking about JTB theory, so justified true beliefs, is replicability, this is going to be like such a great TOK sentence. Is replicability required for justification? I think in the natural sciences, especially in the maths, it very well might be. Okay, let's get on to some evidence. I'm not going to give you all of the answers, but I'm going to get you started. These are so good. By the way, this next mini example right here, I actually just exported this out of TOK Masterclass. So this is an example of the kind of lessons that I do. I do a lesson for every single knowledge framework. Again, you can get it as a discount with coupon code YouTube subscriber. So check this out. In season 5 of Revisionist History, Malcolm Gladwell interviewed Nancy Siegel, a PhD at the Twins Study Center at Cal State Fullerton. Yes, that's a thing. So I can't give you this podcast because it's actually like a private one that you had to pay for. So I'm just a nerd and I pay for podcasts. But I'm going to tell you one of the quotes from this, even though I can't share with you the whole thing. So Nancy she studies twins because twins are often studied as a way to understand the role of genetics in our behavior and health. So why do people behave a certain way? Is it because of upbringing? Or is it because of genetics? These are the kind of things that twins really help us study. And then the same thing, why do we have certain diseases? Is it because some people are just more prone to disease? Or is their lifestyle or behavior shared? So twins are really important because the twins grow up in different situations. We're able to see which studies might be replicated or not. But what's more interesting, so you can go ahead and study any study about twins. That will help you out. Bam, go do that. But things got a little bit more interesting. So in this podcast, Malcolm asked Nancy, what is an impossible experiment that you love to do? So impossible because it would be unethical or it would just be impossible. But what kind of knowledge would you like to gain that you just can't gain? And her idea was all about replicability. Check out what she said. She said that she would love to take quadruplets and split them up. So obviously never going to happen because that's unethical. But since this is impossible, she went further. She wanted the quadruplets to be 2 sets of identical twins, but each set was fraternal. So 2 eggs, each split in 2. So again, now we're going crazy with the biology. So then Nancy is asking the questions, would identical twins be similar even if separated at birth? So she's wanting to see what we know about twins. But here's where things get weird. So when asked what this experiment would teach her, so what new knowledge would this produce, she surprisingly said it would reveal no new knowledge. Instead, it would confirm what she already knew, but in a much more compelling way. So, and then she says, and this is a quote, this could be used in your paper, and that really is the hallmark of good science, replication by multiple methods. So when we're talking about the natural sciences, coming up with a study that learns one thing, Nancy might say that might not even be knowledge because it hasn't been reproduced yet. It could be knowledge, but we're not really that certain of it yet. Look at Nancy's quote here. We know a lot about twins, but the reason we don't know everything is that we cannot do these unethical experiments. Even if this kind of study revealed no new information, it might reveal the same thing that we know anyway, but that's more persuasive. It's a more dramatic and compelling way. So this idea that this thought experiment, this impossible study, it's a more dramatic and compelling way of showing this same thing, which again is the hallmark of good science. So when we talk about Karl Popper and falsificationism, we talk about what really separates science from pseudoscience is scientists should try to prove themselves wrong. And then if they do, they're going to move closer and closer to the truth. And so Nancy is saying, if we can try to do the same experiment in little different ways and come to the same result, that's good science. So Nancy would say replication is the key to justification and certainty in the natural sciences. When it comes to the scope of what we know, and so in my TOK Masterclass, this was knowledge in the knower scope lesson, the most certain knowledge has been confirmed multiple times and ideally in multiple ways. So that's just an example about how replicability works. This next example is actually human sciences and history. I would probably put this down to the human sciences because one of the disciplines of the human sciences is archaeology, but it's going to connect to history. And it's also going to kind of connect to religion, but that's not an A-OK. So when we're talking about religions here, what we don't want to be talking about is like God, but rather the holy texts of these religions and whether or not they're accurate. So the Dead Sea Scrolls, most people would say, was one of the most important scientific discoveries of the 20th century, and it's just a crazy story. So this boy is walking around in the Middle East, takes a rock, throws it in a cave and hears something break. So he finds all these jars of scrolls, and he's like, oh, I can make some money. So he sells it to a collector for $150, which is like really, really sad. That guy doesn't know how much they're worth, so he sells them in the Wall Street Journal classified ads, and the rest is history. Sorry. So what ended up happening is we just get so much stuff from these scrolls because they are 2,000 years old and really haven't been touched. And we find things that are like legal contracts. We find things that are poems, but then about half of it was actually manuscripts of the Torah, of the Hebrew Bible used in Judaism and what the Christians call the Old Testament. And so what's really interesting is you have these 2,000-year-old documents, but the newest documents before we found these were only about 900 years old or 1,000 years old. And so what we have now is we have manuscripts written in, I think it was, I'm just going to write this down on the screen, 935 AD. And then we are comparing them to the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are from over 2,000 years ago. So then they might actually be older than that. And so when we have these documents and we're looking at the knowledge, we're looking at the writing, the really interesting thing is, do they match up? So what happened? Well, as you see in my next slide, the manuscripts didn't change anything. They merely confirmed the belief. So the most wild part about the Dead Sea Scrolls is really how useless they were. If you match up the Dead Sea Scrolls with the manuscripts that Christians and Jews were using at the time, the manuscripts were nearly identical. You had a couple of errors that really were just obvious errors and typos. But that's the really interesting thing about the Dead Sea Scrolls, is that it told us the knowledge that we had didn't totally require being replicated, or at least reproduced. And there's a difference between replicability and reproducibility. But this is an interesting thing. I'm not going to draw all the conclusions here, but I will say, go research the Dead Sea Scrolls. You can check out this website here. I'll put this in the description as well. When you're in the description, go ahead and subscribe, blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm saying. But you can do some of your own research here. And then if you're coming up with your own conclusions about this from looking at the Dead Sea Scrolls on this website, which is what I think you can do, you'll really be able to come up with some interesting ideas on your own. So the question is, was replication required to produce knowledge of the past? I'm not going to give you the answer to this. This is what you have to decide. Another example for human sciences, and there are multiple studies about this, so you got to do some research here, but I'll get you started, is knowledge that we gain from people surveyed when they can and can't find a country on a map. So check this out. This is in 2014. They asked people, can you find Ukraine on a map? And then they asked them, do you want America to go to war in Ukraine? So in 2014, notice this is a little bit different. In 2014, the Washington Post found out the less Americans know about Ukraine, about Ukraine's location, the more they want war. So this kind of study has been done. As you can see here, the next slide, they did the same thing with Iran. Also, take a look at this. Somebody thought Iran was in Alaska. That's kind of sad. Look how many people thought Iran was in Greenland. That's pretty amazing. And then someone thought, okay, that guy's just an idiot. I'm going to give them a sad face there. Yeah. So anyway, only 23% of people knew where Iran was. And so what we're wanting to do, though, is not say, who can find Iran? Instead, what we're doing is saying, if you can find Iran, what are your attitudes? If you can't find Iran or Ukraine, what are your attitudes? Now, what does this have to do with replicability? Well, they recently did this test again, finding people who could and couldn't find Ukraine on a map, and the knowledge changed. Now, people who can't find Ukraine on a map don't want war. People who can find Ukraine on a map do want war. And by war, I mean U.S. intervention. And so what we found out is in 8 years, this test has been completely changed and not replicated at all. So how does that affect knowledge? What does that teach us? Was one of them true, or was it just a blip? And if we tried that again in 2014, we would have got different results. That's going to take us to something at the end of this video. Stay tuned on that. But you really got to think about what is the use of some of these surveys and studies. Okay, going back into the natural sciences, when you do a scientific experiment in class, are you actually experimenting on things, or are you just replicating shared knowledge? Now, one of my favorite things, I think I shared this in one of my TOK exhibition videos, is that I had a student do an experiment in class and he didn't get the results he wanted to do, but he knew that this experiment had been done before by some very famous scientists. And what he was doing was he found that aloe vera gel had some antibacterial qualities. But then when he put his aloe vera gel in the petri dish, bacteria grew. And so did he make a discovery? Oh, I found a bacteria that can grow in aloe vera gel. No, he didn't. He knew that he did something wrong. So he wasn't actually doing an experiment. His teacher was telling him this was an experiment, but it was actually replicating previous shared knowledge. And so when it comes to class, what are you doing that is just confirming beliefs? And so do you have to confirm that to have knowledge? What do you think? This is what I mentioned earlier. There's a controversy in the human sciences, but also in history. Is replicability even possible in some disciplines? So I'm going to put a link to this article, but you can download the PDF here if you want to and read the whole thing. And remember, if you get an article like just scroll down, go to the conclusion. You can just skip through all of this and you can pull some quotes. Take a look at the methods if he talks about that. I glanced through it, but I went straight to the very bottom because what he said was very interesting. Not going to tell you what he said. But here's the issue is that if we're studying, for example, I'll just go to this next slide. This is where scientific studies are most often taking place in the journal Psychological Science. So why might this be a problem of perspective? Well, if we're only doing psychological studies of people in white, industrial, educated, rich, developed, democratic countries, weird. If we're only doing psychological studies of those people, are we really learning about humanity, which is what psychologists claim to be talking about? Or are we just learning about white people? Are we learning about people in these countries? And really, we're talking about people, just really on either side of the Atlantic. How much do we learn from a psychological study at all? And so what this guy's talking about is the idea when we do a psychological study, when we do an anthropological study, how much are we really learning? And if we're studying a person or a group at a specific time and place, that can never be replicated again. So does replication even matter? A good example would be this. Let's say that we did a scientific study of these children and this teacher. And we're studying, let's just say we're studying good teacher behavior, okay? When we get the results, how much knowledge does it actually have? Is it teaching us about teachers? Or is it teaching us about female teachers because we studied a female teacher? Are we learning about all students or primary year students or students of these racial demographics? Are we learning only about African American teachers? Are we learning only about teachers in America in Western settings? And so we can't reproduce this study again because we wouldn't be able to study this woman on that day with those specific students. So what some people are saying today, and this is really important, is that replicability cannot happen. Therefore, it isn't important. That might be a great way of opening your TOK essay, but this is asking, is replicability even possible? And then if it's not possible, then your answer would be, it's not required. That really goes into history too when we talk about some things that will never happen again. You can pick any huge event. We're never going to really be able to learn the truth about it just because we're never going to go back in time. And those contextual situations, those events are never going to happen again. So if you like a lot of the evidence here, you can check out TOK Masterclass at tokmasterclass.com. Let me just do a .com. And if you use YouTube subscriber as your coupon, you get 10% off. I can also look at your drafts on Fiverr, and I can give you free stuff at getanandtok.com/ you guessed it, free stuff. Yeah, this is a great prompt. Put some stuff in the comments if you're still here. I hope TOK sucks a little bit less. I'll see you next time.